What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the third and final video in my Blockchain for Dummies series. If you haven't seen the first and second video that go over what blockchain is and how it works, I will put a card in the above section so you can check that out. In this video, I'm going to go over 6 crucial characteristics that you can evaluate the use of blockchain for a specific business practice or a specific use case. We'll go over that and how blockchain is being used in the market today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So oftentimes the hype around cryptocurrencies and the investment part of blockchain drowns out the actual information about use cases and real-world applications of blockchain technology outside an industry and also with consumer applications. And as we talked about in the first couple of videos, blockchain has a deep-rooted relationship with game theory, management practice, the formation of what's called a consortia or a group of organizations working together around a set of operating rules. And I'll talk more about that in a future video, so definitely don't forget to subscribe for future videos. Now, what I wanted to do in this video is give you 6 crucial characteristics that you can use to evaluate the fit of blockchain technology for a particular use case. You can think of a use case like a business process or a set of business processes. It's just a use for the technology, hence the term use case. So one of the first and most important characteristics in this equation is trust. Trust is a word that is used so many times with blockchain, and the consensus process is essentially created to establish trust between two parties that wish to transact with one another that may not know each other or may not trust each other fully. But there's obviously varying levels of trust between individuals, and the same thing applies between businesses or organizations. So you can think of trust between two people as literally what it is, trust. I maybe don't trust someone in New England that I want to transact with because I've never met them, but I want to send them some money for a service. I want to trust, like I would trust a bank, that my money is not going to get lost and it's going to go to the right person and I'm protected from double spend and fraud and these sorts of things. That's what the consensus process is there for, and that's how blockchain effectively disintermediates the process of sending money. Now, in a business, it's not necessarily the same thing. Trust between two businesses may not be that cut and dry. In my opinion, trust between two businesses is more so difference in business interest. For example, two different businesses may be in the same industry, but they have two different operating interests. They both want to accomplish two different things. So for example, let's take a supply chain, a diamond supply chain more specifically. The supplier or miners of a diamond, they want to sell the diamond and make profit from what they're mining. But a retailer, like think the Jared's or the K Jewelers, they are looking to get high quality diamonds at a reasonable price from suppliers, and they want to trust that what they're getting is A, legitimate, and B, of good quality, so they can sell it to their customers. So there is a level of mistrust between the two parties, but it's less so raw trust, it's more so competing business needs, competing business interests. They both are in the same supply chain, they're both in the same process, but they're looking to accomplish different things with their business. So that's what you can think of trust as in this context of blockchain. With businesses and with people, trust can manifest in many different ways. And as a rule of thumb, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but the more trust that there is, so the higher the level of trust, the lower and less resource intensive the consensus process has to be. Because like we've discussed, the consensus process is really there to manifest or to create that trust or to serve as a bridge between two different parties that may not trust one another as they transact. So keep that in mind. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, but by and large, it will follow that curve. The higher the trust, the less powerful your consensus mechanism has to be. So the first thing that you want to do to evaluate a use case is look at what levels of trust there are between parties. If between two businesses, they both have the same business need, maybe they don't necessarily need, they don't necessarily need a blockchain. They could use it for, to record transactions and establish better audit practices, but maybe it's not necessarily a great fit. Who knows? That's one of those things where you can take this concept of trust and extrapolate that across multiple businesses and organizations and say, hey, well, if in this diamond supply chain use case, there's the suppliers, like the miners, the shippers, the retailers, and the end consumers, and each one of those parties has a different need or requirement in the supply chain. So a blockchain might be a great way to facilitate the sharing of information and the facilitation of transactions between those parties, because they all have different business interests, but they're all really in the same process together. They could form a consortia and build a blockchain in which each transaction and business event is tracked and recorded, and transactions are facilitated in near real time for low fees. There would be a lot of value there. So that's the first one. Trust is something that you can always look at. It's a little bit nebulous, as in difficult to understand when it starts getting complicated and there's a lot of businesses involved or lots of organizations, but it is definitely really important to note. So the second characteristic that I wanted to talk about is the ease of auditability. And what I mean by this is, think about every business that you can think of, and even your own personal finances. You need to, at the end of the year, be able to, at the request of the IRS or whatever other country you're from, that tax collecting entity, you need to be able to procure an audit listing of what you've purchased, different exemptions that you've claimed. You have to be able to go back throughout your whole year of finances, or maybe even longer, and give information about those. And if any of you have ever been through an audit, I personally haven't, but I've seen them being done. It's really difficult to literally pull receipts and pull papers and find every transaction that you've made that you need to declare, and to dig up all the information that you need. An audit is a very difficult process from an individual perspective. Now think of that in terms of a business. An audit of a business is a huge, huge ordeal, and millions of dollars are spent every single year by companies to have audits done. And I'm not saying that the blockchain is going to replace the people that do these audits. Rather, I'm saying it makes it easier for these people to do their jobs and do them effectively. So think about the blockchain like we've discussed. It's an immutable recordation mechanism of transactions, which can also represent business events. So it doesn't have to be the exchange of money, it could be the exchange of products. It could record a time that an employee accessed a system. It could record, the moment where a product changed hands, so on and so forth. So when you have this immutable record of all these business events and all these things that have happened in the past, it's very easy for someone auditing to go back and not only find all these records, but trust that those are the true and correct records. So the blockchain forms this central source of truth pertaining to what it's recording. And from an auditability perspective, that's a huge value, both for the business and for the individuals coming in to do the audit. And I think when I look at blockchain in and of itself, I think first of where can it add value from an audit perspective? How can we use the blockchain to our advantage at the end of the year when audits need to be done? You can always look at that. If there's a business like, let's just say that same supply chain example. At the end of the year, K Jewelers needs to determine how many diamonds it purchased versus how many it sold, and from what batches, even from what suppliers sold the best. These sorts of audit practices internally are very important. And if you have this stuff recorded on the blockchain, it's a one-stop shop to find all the information. And in business nowadays, a lot of systems have become fragmented. Some data is in one database, some data is in another one, and it gets very difficult to track everything down. With the blockchain, you have it all in one place, assuming you have done a good job of implementing that blockchain solution. So an ease of auditability is one of the things that you can use to also evaluate a use case. Think about it in terms of how much value having one central source of truth for auditing would add value to a business or to an organization or even to an individual. So also, there's a pretty obvious one here, and that is exchange of value. a blockchain inherently handles really well the exchange of value. And this value can represent all sorts of things. It can be an intangible, like, like the deed to a house. It can be an intangible, like even loyalty points. Or it can be something tangible, like a currency or like a physical representation of a product. Who knows? There's all sorts of things that you can use the blockchain to send to another person. And obviously, when you start trying to bridge between the physical and digital world, and I say, I'm going to send you this apple, all that's really being sent on the blockchain is the digital representation of that apple. And it's still up to me to send that apple in the physical world. That's something that we haven't solved yet. But in the end, blockchain is there to record this transaction. It establishes accountability. So if you think about it in terms of a business, if you have a business or businesses where multiple parties exchange with one another very often. So let's think of another supply chain example where each member of the supply chain is all contributing a certain amount of raw goods. They want to record those transactions. If someone on the supply chain sends on the blockchain 1,000 units of something, but the actual shipment comes in and there's only 950, that blockchain record is a central source of truth. It's shared by everyone. No one has the permission to go in there and really change anything on their own. So it serves as a form of accountability. That business that short sent, it's going to be easy for them to be identified as, hey, you guys claimed you sent 1,000, but you only sent 950. That's one of those benefits of having a blockchain solution and having it shared amongst different parties in a business process, because every business then is accountable for their actions on the blockchain. And even if their what they send in the physical world doesn't match the digital record, it's very easy for everyone else to say, hey, yeah, it doesn't match, we need to work this out. And you can have a set of operating rules to help manage and facilitate the fix for that issue. So the exchange of value obviously can be established in many different ways. And it's one of those things where when you are exchanging value on the blockchain, sometimes if you're trying to transact a physical object, you can't necessarily do that on the blockchain. You're just transacting the digital version. But it does create a one-stop shop to hold parties accountable for what they've claimed they've sent. And now governments all over the world are starting to accept blockchain-based records or smart contracts. And that's another thing I'll create a video about, as a form of written law, and it can be upheld in court. So if I say I promise on the blockchain to send you something and I don't, you could take me to court and say, hey, you promised that you would send this to me. It's in writing on the blockchain. You now need to, we need to get this rectified. That is a huge movement to even digital contracts that can be upheld in the court of law. So think about the exchange of value and the potential for that exchange of value to be facilitated on the blockchain when you evaluate a use case. So the fourth, and another one of the ones that's really near and dear to my heart, is the ability for a blockchain to facilitate transactions amongst multiple collaborative writers. And what I mean by multiple collaborative writers is that multiple different entities can write to the blockchain, and multiple different entities own the blockchain together. There's no one party that owns it. So if you think about modern IT, and if you don't work in IT or you don't really know much about it, no worries. There's just one key point here. Most modern IT systems like databases or even some data analytics engines, a lot of these things are owned by one entity. They're owned by one business, and they don't share their data. Not only do they not want to share their data, they aren't built to share. And that to me seems like a missed opportunity, because I feel like in the business world, a lot of businesses would benefit from sharing data with one another, especially ones in the same line of business. Complementary businesses would do great things if they could share their data with one another. Obviously within reason. There's things that are owned by that company and it's proprietary. But by and large, having a transaction network where two businesses that do business together very often Why would they want to hold two separate databases and try and reconcile those once a year in an audit? Why wouldn't you want one network that you both share that can foster accountability and create this auditable record for you both and streamline the processes that you guys often do together? So having the ability to use a blockchain for multiple collaborative writers to this ledger, this digital record of business events or transactions is huge. And for me, I look at it like this. If I look at a business and I say, this business works with, these other five, they're always in the news together and they're all complementary. Why wouldn't they want this? Why wouldn't they want to collaborate together on a blockchain? And that's how I start to evaluate a use case. If there's a use case like this diamond supply chain, to me, it would make no sense not to do this because the value is huge. The cost savings from facilitating payments on the blockchain, the efficiency of being able to track every transaction in one place without having to worry about all these disparate or fragmented IT systems, and to be able to establish traceability from the end consumer all the way back to the diamond mine that person's diamond came from. There's so many things that add value about just putting the business, the process onto a blockchain in the form of a big consortium. And multiple collaborative writers on that blockchain means that everyone really has equal footing. Everyone has equal say on the blockchain. They're held accountable for their actions, and then they in turn hold others accountable for theirs. And it becomes this microeconomy that you've built with one decentralized blockchain, decentralized network of transactions. So when you look at use cases, always think about how you could have multiple collaborative writers in a decentralized environment. So that brings me to my fifth point, and that is decentralization. So if you think about a decentralized economy, that seems like a really far-fetched idea where there is no central governing body. That's something that people talk about all the time, and I think it's possible, who knows? But there's a lot of moving parts to that beast. I think it's more likely that we start seeing business processes become more decentralized. And why does decentralization matter? It's because the more centralized a process becomes, the more prone it is to an IT system failure, taking that whole process down. So if we think about our banking systems today, or you think about the supply chain systems or the inventory systems for a big retailer like Target, if they are the direct target of a hack and their systems go down, that's downtime for their business. And when they come back up, they better hope that they have a backup to bring back all of their data. They've lost a ton of money in potential sales. They've lost a ton of reputation in the market for the time they've spent down and being susceptible to that hack. But beyond that, there's no one else that can be there to help pick them back up. It's all on them. In a decentralized system, like on a blockchain, we've talked about this before, but if a node for Target goes down and they're on a blockchain network with a bunch of other retailers or suppliers for their products, if their node goes down, they have a catastrophic failure. Let's just say it's a crazy power outage at the data center. When their nodes boot back up, they don't have to worry about fiddling with backups. They don't have to worry about, they don't have to worry about some of the things that they had to worry about the more centralized they were. The other nodes in the network will feed them their information and help bring them back up to speed on what's been going on in the network. Obviously, they're still having downtime. Obviously, new transactions that they would be creating couldn't have been created during that downtime. But what I mean is that the more decentralized you are, the wider spread you are in terms of ability for someone to attack you. You've created this decentralized system where you're fault tolerant. If one node goes down, the other nodes pick up the slack and then feed the information back when that node comes back up. You've created this environment where you've decentralized trust, you've decentralized the responsibility to support the network, and you've created an environment that's different than the centralized IT that we have today. So I always look at decentralization as kind of has a little bit of a lower weight for me in evaluating use cases, because obviously not every business practice or process would benefit from decentralization. Not every bit of data should or could be shared. There are things that are proprietary. There are things that you don't want to share with others as a business or an individual. And I totally get that. And that's why I say it's an evaluation. Sometimes there are pluses and negatives to each of these different characteristics. So definitely bear that in mind. But decentralization is one of those big factors of blockchain, and it's something that pretty much comes inherently the more people or more businesses or organizations that join into that blockchain network. So with that, let's move on to the final characteristic that you can look at. So the sixth and final characteristic that you can use to evaluate a blockchain use case is, in my opinion, the most important crown jewel of blockchain, and that is disintermediation. If you don't know what disintermediation is, no worries, I'll give you a quick rundown now. Disintermediation is the process of removing a third party or an intermediary from a process. So the banking example I gave in one of my first videos is, now if I want to send money to my family overseas in London, I have to initiate that transaction on my bank account, and then my bank has to do some work, some physical manual work on their end to send that money over to, let's just say, the Bank of England. The Bank of England then has to do some paperwork to send that money to my family's bank account, and throughout that process it's taken time and it's cost money because I had to pay a fee to send that money overseas. I had to exchange between two currencies, which costs money. There are a lot of things in that process that are inefficient, but there really aren't any other options these days. With blockchain, you can disintermediate that process. You can remove the banks from that process by using the blockchain network to transact that money overseas nearly instantly and at low cost. And on the other end, all the person has to do is pull that cryptocurrency out as Great British pounds or euros or whatever it is that they want. And obviously there are some caveats. It doesn't always work that well nowadays, but it's the concept that I'm talking about. You can disintermediate that process, cut costs, make things more efficient, make things faster. That's something that I think makes blockchain so special, is that there are so many opportunities for blockchain to change the way we do things every single day. And it won't necessarily make you feel the complexity behind the scenes. If I transact with the blockchain now, it's just as easy as it was to use my bank account, in my opinion. And that's what we're going to start to see, is that we'll start using applications every single day that are backed by blockchain, and we won't even really know it. And that's what's so special about it. And that's why I like to draw parallels between this and the internet. It's a whole new paradigm, a whole new way of doing things. So disintermediation is a huge part of blockchain, in my opinion. And when I look at a use case and its potential to change the world or to change the game for a business or business practice, I look at where it can disintermediate. I look at where blockchain could take a third party out of the equation and establish some cost savings. It could make things more efficient, whether it could create even new forms of revenue for a business. So, I mean, there are so many different things, just like taking banks out of the cross-border payments example, that you can look at when you look at a business. So if you think about it, look at the process of buying and selling large amounts of goods between two businesses. Oftentimes, there are lawyers and accountants and individuals in that process that help draft the agreement, that help facilitate the agreement, and establish that transaction. Maybe with a blockchain, you could use a smart contract, a digital piece of code that is upheld by the power of law to facilitate that transaction without having to have a lawyer there every single time you want to transact with one of your business partners. You can basically have an agreement built on the blockchain. And, you know, it's never, in my opinion, will never truly replace these professionals like lawyers and accountants, all these sorts of people, but it will help make the processes more efficient. Lawyers, instead of being there boots on the ground to facilitate this agreement and to draft it up and, you know, go through iterative processes over a couple of weeks, they can put the boilerplate agreement onto the blockchain, and then the businesses themselves can negotiate between the two, digitally sign it and agree and facilitate that transaction. So instead of paying the lawyer, you know, for 20 hours to facilitate the agreement, You can pay up front for the service of setting up that blockchain smart contract. Now, there are obviously, steps that I skipped in that example, but you get the idea. You've then created an environment where the businesses now can work together without having someone in between them facilitating and being paid to do something. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity for businesses to disintermediate. And this also has a direct value to us because as consumers, disintermediation can bring us, cheaper prices on products, more efficient service, faster service. There's so many other things that trickle down into the, through the economy to the end consumer when you start having big businesses disintermediate processes and receive cost savings or receive better efficiency. So definitely keep that in mind. Whenever you look at a use case, try and think about how disintermediation factors in. What sorts of third parties and intermediaries could you remove if you established a blockchain and allowed two businesses or two individuals or more to work together with each other directly instead of between a third party? So I hope that these 6 characteristics have given you a better understanding of how to evaluate blockchain in the market and get you thinking about what types of use cases there are out in the market. So I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite use cases in future videos. So that's one of the next series that's coming up. It's an evaluation, if you will, or an explanation of some of my favorite use cases on the market for blockchain and some of the ways I've actually gotten the chance to work on and see worked on in industry where blockchain is being established and already adopted by businesses and individuals. So if you liked this video, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I will be posting videos every single week about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and everything in between. And please remember to leave me a comment if there's anything you'd like to see on this channel. I always want to give you guys what you'd like to see. So thank you guys for joining me. Happy holidays. Cheers.